Okay, so we shall continue, right? So here now the story continues with Ivan's giving exam, so-called exam, because we are not sure, is he really giving German language exam genuinely or not? Is he interested? Because every time Stephens mentioned the prison officer, he had mentioned that every time he had tried to look through the peephole, he found Evans sitting with a pen between his teeth, staring blankly. So what does it mean? Either he is disinterested, completely disinterested, or he is completely blank, he does not know anything. Or there could be the possibility, actually, he is not giving any exam. As per his past record, maybe this was also a trick by him. If he is able to hit it, then he would be able to escape. But hopefully this time he should not, because he is being heavily guarded, very meticulously watched and looked after, right? At 10:51 a.m., anyway, during the exam, in between, he interrupts the invigilator, requesting for a blanket, complaining that it was cold. He is allowed to put on the blanket. At 10:51 a.m., Stephens was more than a little surprised to see a grey regulation blanket draped around Ivan's shoulders. And he frowned slightly and looked at the examinee more closely. At 10:51 a.m., you see that in the beginning, Stephens had been peeping through the hole after every 1 minute. Gradually, he started doing so after every 2 minutes. So maybe he has become more relaxed when he found everything okay, right? And later on, you will find, okay, that I'll come to that point later. So he must be feeling relaxed. But at 10:51 a.m., after some interval of time, when he had peeped through the hole, he was surprised. He was surprised to find Evans wearing a grey blanket around him. So he had been trying to look at him more closely. He frowned, he was a bit upset. But Evans, the pen still between his teeth, was staring just as vacantly as before. But at the same time, he found that Evans was still sitting with the pen between his teeth, staring at as if the peephole, as vacantly as before, as vacantly meaning as disinterested he appeared earlier. Now, every time Stephens had tried to see through the peephole, you know, something interesting there, what it is, he had found him not only with the pen between his teeth, but staring at one point. What does it mean, Manish? That Evans was alert. He knew that he was being watched through the peephole, right? Blankly beneath a blanket. Should Stephens report the slight irregularity? Irregularity, the slight change, the slight transition. Now he was in a fix. Whether he should let it happen or he should inform, he should report that there is some change, there is something, some activity happening in the cell, anything at all fishy. He was just trying to guess, is it something suspicious? Fishy meaning suspicious, doubtful. Hadn't Jackson said? He remembers that Jackson had said, if there is anything that is suspicious or doubtful, he should immediately be contacted or reported. He looked through the peephole once again. He just wanted to reconfirm that there was nothing sort of what he thought or what he assumed. So in order to reconfirm once again, he looked through the peephole. And even as he did so, Evans pulled the dirty blanket more closely to himself. Next time when he saw what he found that Ivan had been pulling the dirty blanket more closely to himself. Do you think that Ivan is doing something? Or it is simply wrapping the blanket around him because it was cold?
No, ma'am, he was trying to do something.
There was a plan. Definitely he was sitting with a plan. And when he asked for the blanket, when he wrapped it around him, it means that he was giving a shape to his plan. Was he planning a sudden Batman leap to suffocate McLeary in the blanket? Now, this is Stephen's speculation. He had all these suspicions. He had been analyzing all those doubts. He said maybe that he is keeping this blanket and he might have planned like a Batman just to suffocate McLeary, just to choke him in the blanket and then run away. But then this is the kind of the confusion or the debate going on in his mind, and then he himself concludes, don't be daft, that I should not talk like a silly man. There was never any sun on this side of the prison, no heating either during the summer months, and it could get quite chilly in some of the cells. And then he himself draws the conclusion that it is a prison. It must be very chilly, very cold in the cell. It is a prison cell, not only ordinary prison, but a cell, deep cell, where the sunlight, sun heat cannot reach, even during the summer. So it could be cold. That's why he needed a blanket. He himself had the doubts in the mind, and he himself draws conclusion. Stephens decided to revert to his earlier every minute observation. He thought, okay, just to get rid of this kind of suspiciousness, best it is that he would keep watching him after every minute. He would not be relaxing now. So at 11:20 a.m., the receiver once more crackled across the silence of the governor's office. From the governor's office, once more, the receiver rang. The phone rang at 11:20. McLeary informed Evans that only 5 minutes remained. The examination was almost over, but something still gnawed away quietly in the governor's mind. Evans was informed when the phone rang. Evans was informed by McLeary that only 5 minutes were left and the exam was over. But something still gnawed. Gnaw is actually to chew. But here in this context, gnawed away quietly in the governor's mind, there was something that had made the governor anxious, worried. He reached for the phone once more. What was it? It was the phone call that had been making him anxious. At 11:22 a.m., Jackson shouted along the corridor to Stephens. What is this? This is the after effect of governor's anxiety, because he had never wanted to leave any scope this time for Evans to escape. He is very, very careful. He is very alert. That's why personally he is looking after everything and he is watching everything. So he could not check himself. So at 11:22 a.m., Jackson, he just called for Stephens. That the governor has ordered for the Stephens to see him immediately. The governor wanted to speak with him. Hurry, man. Stephens picked up the phone apprehensively and listened to the repeatedly spoken orders. Stephens was also a bit apprehensive. He immediately picked up the phone and listened to the governor's instructions. Stephens himself was to accompany McLeary to the main prison gates. Now do remember, this is governor giving an order to Stephens that he should see off McLeary at the prison gates, and he should do it personally. He should accompany him. McLeary should not be, after the exam is over, he should not be allowed to go out himself. No, he would be accompanied by Stephens. Stephens personally was to make absolutely sure that the door was locked on Evans after McLeary had left the cell. And again, it was very important for Stephens that when McLeary leaves, he has to be sure that the door is locked. Evans is locked in the cell. And he just wanted to reconfirm, understood, to which Stephens said, understood. Now, let us see that really the governor, what the governor is going to do. As the governor is cautious, so is Stephens, so is Jackson. Do we think that Evans would not be able to escape? Or we are unaware of Evans' actual plans? Let's see, at 11:25 a.m., the governor heard the final exchanges. This is the time for the exam to be over. The governor heard the final exchanges, the final conversation between McLeary and Evans. McLeary told him to stop writing and told him to arrange his sheets in order with correct numbers. And then there was a bit sound of chairs and tables. Evans expressed his respect. Whether he was respectful or not, nobody knows. But yes, he did express by thanking him. And McLeary asked, right, was it? How was the paper? Was it okay? He said, not too bad. Good, Mr. Stephens. Very loud. The governor heard the door clang for the last time. The governor had not yet turned off the microphone. He is waiting for each and everything that happened till the end. So he heard the door that was being shut the last time after the exam was over. How did he get on, do you think, asked Stephens as he walked beside McLeary to the main gates. Now, what is this? Stephens had been ordered by governor to escort McLeary at the main gates. So Stephens is following the orders. While he escorts McLeary to the main gates, he asks him, how did he get on, do you think? How did he do, Evans? Oh, I cannot think he's distinguished himself. I don't think he knew anything. I'm afraid. His Scots accent seemed broader than ever. His Scots accent, Scot is Scottish. His Scottish accent, that was different than earlier. And his long black overcoat, reaching almost to his knees, fostered the illusion that he had suddenly grown slimmer. Now, who is this? Whose Scottish accent? Is this Evans or McLeary being talked here? Yes, Paresh, could you understand? Whose long black overcoat is being talked here? Is that McLeary or Evans?
McLeary.
McLeary. McLeary. When McLeary came, he had his Scottish accent, but this time when he was going back, Stephens was talking to McLeary and he found that his Scottish accent was different than before. And the black overcoat that he was wearing, it was too long till his knees, up to his knees, that fostered the illusion. Illusion is imagination. That gave him the imagination. That led to the imagination as if he had grown thinner. When Stephens describes this, it means there is something to be pondered over, something suspicious. Suspicious about McLeary. Is McLeary really McLeary? Is he really the invigilator? Is he really the churchman, the clergyman? We'll discover later. Stephens felt pleased that the governor had asked him and not Jackson to see McCleary off the premises. And all in all, the morning had gone pretty well. Stephens was very happy, feeling proud that governor had trusted him more, relied on him more, that he had given him the duty to escort McCleary, not Jackson. So this is what usually the cops try to do. And he was happy that everything had gone well. But something stopped him from making his way directly to the canteen for a belated cup of coffee. He wanted to go to the canteen to have a cup of coffee, but then he preferred not to go. There was something that stopped him from going to the canteen. He wanted to take just one last look at Ivan's. What is it? Somewhere the fear, the anxiety still there. Though he was satisfied, oh, everything went off very well. But then he thought that no, last minute, once again, he should go to the cell and look at Ivan's through the peephole. It was just like a program he had seen on TV about a woman who could never really convince herself that she had locked the front door when she had gone to bed. And often she had got up 12, 15, sometimes 20 times to check the bolts. So this is the human nature. When you are extra cautious, then time and again you would check it. Just as not only the women at home, but the one who has the responsibility to lock up all the doors at home at night, would be checking so many times. And everybody in the house would keep asking him, have you locked the door? Have you locked the door? And every time everybody asked, he would go and to make sure that yes, he had locked the doors. So it's just like that he also wanted to go to be sure once again that Evans was there. He re-entered the wing, made his way, because the cell was there, made his way along to Ivan's cell, and he opened the peephole once more. Oh no, Christ, no. Oh, something is there, something fishy. Certainly some trouble waiting there, which they had thought, which they had imagined, which they had suspected and expected in the beginning. But now they seem to be happy that there is nothing, no fear. There, sprawled back in Ivan's chair, was a man. For a semi-second, Stephens thought it must be Ivan's. A grey regulation blanket slipping from his shoulders. The front of his closely cropped, irregularly tufted hair awash with fierce red blood, which had dripped already through the small black beard. Yes, what he found, to his complete, utter dismay, and to his utter shock and surprise, what he found, that in Ivan's chair was sprawling back, in Ivan's chair was lying back, a man. For half a second, he thought it must be Ivan's. Now, do remember this point. What he saw, that the man in the grey blanket was lying back in the chair, whose partly the blanket was on his shoulder and partly on the floor. And the man was McCleary. But when for the first time he saw him, he thought for half the second that must be Evans. So this is very important point here. But what he realized, that the man who was sitting there was his closely cropped, irregularly tufted hair awash. Tufted hair had become tough in a bunch of hair. A bunch of hair had become over there. Why? Because it was awash, it was covered with the fierce red blood. The blood which had dripped, which had flowed through the small black beard, and was now spreading horribly over the white clerical collar and down into the black clerical front. The blood was flowing through his beard onto the clerical collar and then the black overcoat. Again, the point to remember, Manish, what it is: the blood flowing from the head. Why from the head? Because closely cropped hair in a bunch turned into a bunch as it was covered with blood. The blood was dripping from there through his beard to his collars. Right? So there is mystery of the collars, mystery of the beard, mystery of that tufted hair, and mystery of the blood. Right? Stephen shouted wildly for Jackson, and the words appeared to penetrate the curtain of blood that veiled McLary's ears. For the minister's hand felt feebly for a handkerchief from his pocket and held it to his bleeding head, the blood seeping slowly through the white linen. Stephen shouted wildly for Jackson. He was shocked. Stephen was shocked. He couldn't believe. So he shouted. He shouted loudly for Jackson. He shouted loudly to draw the attention of Jackson. And he was so loud that his words could be heard by McLary, however, his ears were covered with blood. The words appeared to penetrate. The words could reach the veiled McLary's ears. The words could reach McLary's ears through the curtain of blood, though they were covered with the blood, because the words were so loud. In simpler words, the Stephens was so loud that even though his ears were covered with blood, yet McLary could also hear what Stephens said. And the minister's, that is McLary's hand, felt feebly, weakly. Feeble is weak. He was looking very weak, and very weakly he had been surfing for a handkerchief from his pocket. And then he held that handkerchief onto his bleeding head. You remember? You remember that before the exam, he had been keeping a hanky on the bed. It was hanky number 2, right? So what does it indicate? What does it indicate? That Evans was well planned, and Evans had a very good plan, and he was equipped with everything for his escape. He gave a long, low moan, a cry, a deep cry he made. He cried with pain, and he tried to speak. Now we don't know whether he cried with pain or he was pretending to cry, right? Because he was an impersonator. He tried to speak, and then expressing that he is so weak that he cannot speak. But his voice trailed away. He tried to speak, but his voice trailed away. His voice trailed away, meaning his voice stopped, meaning he could not speak. And by the time Jackson had arrived and dispatched Stephens to ring the police and the ambulance, the handkerchief was a sticky, squelchy wodge of cloth. By the time Jackson he had arrived there, right? And he had ordered Stephens to ring the police, to call the police, and for the ambulance, to call the police and the ambulance, to call the police because Evans seems to be missing, and the ambulance because Mackerley was lying injured there. And the handkerchief which he had put on his head to stop the bleeding, that had become a sticky, squelchy. Squelchy meaning wet. Wodge meaning piece, watch piece of cloth. So that handkerchief had become completely soiled in the blood, and it had become a wet piece of cloth. Yes, any problem till here?
No, ma'am.
Okay. McCleary slowly raised himself, his face twisted tightly with pain. He was trying to get up. Don't know what he wrote, the ambulance man. I'm all right. I'm all right. Get the police. He's asking for the police. He is pretending, he is showing that he wants to help the police. He knows the whereabouts of Evans. He says, I know where he. He closed his eyes. Another drip of blood splashed like a huge red raindrop on the wooden floor. His hand felt along the table, found the German question paper, and grasped it tightly in his blood-stained hand. His hand reached for the German question paper, which Evans got. It was completely blood-stained because his hands were blood-stained. Get the governor. He asked for the governor. He wanted to meet governor. And he wanted to tell the governor where Evans was. Do you think that he really wanted to tell the governor where Evans was? Yes.
What, ma'am? Ma'am, I didn't understand.
Do you think that he really wanted to tell the governor where Evans was? Or if he knew really where Evans was?
No, ma'am. Ma'am, he was trying to, ma'am, just to,
He was
ma'am,
just
he
trying to
was
be
acting like that. He knows everything, but he doesn't know.
okay, fine. All right. So now you have to listen to each and everything very carefully, because we have to discover Evans also, right? And we have to discover McCleary also. Do remember this thing. Almost immediately, sirens were sounding. Prison officers barked orders. Puzzled prisoners pushed their way along the corridors. Doors were banged, bolted. Phones were ringing everywhere. All this hush. You know that all this kind of hustle and bustle started in the prison. Why? Because the message had been sent everywhere. Invigilator injured and Evans not seen anywhere. So immediately sirens were sounding. Sirens for alert, for alarm, just as in the school you have a hooter, right? That hooter siren that was sounding. And prison officers, they were given orders. The prisoners, those who were in the corridors, they got confused. They just lined up along the walls of the corridors. The doors were being shut and opened and bolted. Phones were ringing everywhere. They were receiving calls, they were making calls. So like everybody was seemed to be in a hurry. And within a minute, McCleary, with Jackson and Stephens supporting him on either side, his face now streaked and caked with drying blood, was greeted in the prison yard by the governor, perplexed and grim. Governor definitely was perplexed, confused, disturbed, completely unclear. He could not understand what has happened. Grim. He could not see anything. Nothing was clear to him. That despite being so watchful, despite being so meticulous, despite making so elaborate arrangements, still this has happened. And when McCleary was brought to him, his face was now streaked and caked. There were lines of blood on his face because the blood was drying. We must get you to hospital immediately. I just don't. You call the police? Yes, they are on their way. But I'm all right. Look here. Awkwardly, he opened the German question paper and thrust it and put it before the governor's face. It's there. Do you see what I mean? He is giving an evidence of unscrupulousness of Evans. That Evans cannot be relied. That Evans is an escapist. Again, he has escaped. Again, he had been playing a trick. Again, he had carried out a plan. And the evidence of that plan is there in the form of a photocopy in the question paper. He put it before the governor. The governor looked down and realized what McClary was trying to tell him. A photocopied sheet had been carefully and cleverly superimposed over the last page of the question paper. The last page of the question paper was actually blank, but the photocopy of the message from those very people who were engaged in his escape plan, that had been pasted, that had been put up there over the last page. This is what McClary was trying to tell him. Now let us see if that is also true, or again, this is also a plot to hoodwink the governor or the prison authorities. You see what they have done, governor? You see, his voice trailed off again as the governor, dredging the layers of long neglected learning, willed himself to translate the German text before him. You see what they have done, governor. His voice trailed off again. His voice stopped again. It wasn't stopping. He was an impersonator. It was all his theatrical skill, we would say. Those who impersonate, they definitely have good theatrical skills. Then only they can disguise themselves, isn't it? So when he said this, the governor, he was dredging the layers. He was dredging, meaning he was recollecting. He was recollecting, he was trying to recall, he was trying to remember the layers of long neglected learning. What is that long neglected learning? His past knowledge of German. Once upon a time when he was in the school, he learned. So he was just recollecting, he was just remembering his past knowledge of German language. And with the help of that, he motivated himself, he made an effort to translate that German text, the message, that photocopied message. He was trying to translate that. Now, this is the German message which is given here, and its translation is, you must follow the plan already something. The vital point in time is 3 minutes before the end of the examination, but something, don't hit him too hard, remember, he's a minister. And don't overdo the Scots accent when. This is the message, the guideline for Evans. There is a plan, and the most important point is 3 minutes before the end of the exam. If you remember what had happened at 11:22, exam finished at 11:25. And what had happened at 11:22? Let's go back. At 11:22, there was the phone ringing, right? At 11:22, there was, at 11:20, the phone rang. At 11:22, the phone rang, which had been making the governor upset, right? And the message says, the message guides Evans that he should be ready. The most important time is 3 minutes before the end of the exam. But something, a hint to him to do something. And then the instructions for him that he should hit the minister, that is McClary, but not too harsh. And then he should not exaggerate with his Scottish accent. A fast approaching siren wailed to its crescendo. The great doors of the prison yard were pushed back, and a white police car squealed to a jerky halt beside them. A fast approaching siren wailed. Sound. A fast siren could be sounded. The loudest sound of the siren could be heard. Crescendo is the loudest sound. And the doors of the prison yard, they were closed. And a white police car came with a jerk beside them. Detective Superintendent Carter swung himself out of the passenger seat and saluted the governor. Now, Carter, Detective Superintendent, he reached there, he saluted the governor. What the hell is happening, sir? And then he turned to McClary, Christ, who is it him? He inquired, what has happened? But McClary cut across whatever explanation the governor might have given. McClary cut across, meaning McClary did not let governor explain anything. What he might have explained, McClary spoke first. Elsfield Way, officer. I know where he was. He said Elsfield Way, the place. He was breathing heavily. He could not breathe and leaned for support against the side of the car, where the imprint of his hand was left in tarnished crimson. Crimson is red color, movish red color. So he could not stand, he could not breathe, McClary, and he put his hand on the side of the car. As a result, the blood stains imprinted on the car, making it look tarnished, meaning dirty. In bewilderment, Carter looked to the governor for guidance. Carter was surprised. But then he asked the governor for guidance, meaning tell what is next to be done. Take him with you. If you think he'll be all right, he's the only one who seems to know what is happening. He says, take him and make sure he should be all right because he knows everything. This is what you know that it happens in such cases. That a person who has been caught or who is very much present there, and when the cops believe that the person must be knowing or he could give some loopholes or he could give some evidence, then every effort is made to ensure that that person is safe and secure. Carter opened the back door, helped McClary inside, and within a few seconds, the car leaped away, moved away very quickly in a spurt of gravel. In a spurt of gravel, gravel meaning stones. So in a spurt of gravel, it moved away so quickly, throwing the stones nearby aside. Now the governor is thinking, McClary had said Elsfield away. And there it was staring up at the governor from the last few lines of the German text. The governor had been thinking of the last text lines of that photocopied message. From Elsfield Way drive to the Haddington roundabout, where, yes, of course, the examinations board was in Elsfield Way. Elsfield was mentioned in that message, and governor remembered that the examination board was in Elsfield. So he was sure that someone from the board must have been involved in the escape plan from the very beginning. Definitely there was someone in the examination board who had been helping Evans, who was involved in this escape plan. And he is the one who must have manipulated in the question paper itself and then tempered with that correction slip or had put that correction slip. Because nobody can manipulate with the question paper, nobody can temper with the correction slip or question paper until or unless someone from the examination board. The governor turned to Jackson and Stephens. The governor is very panicked. The governor is quite embarrassed. He is embarrassed. He is distraught at his failure. See that Jackson, Stephens, Carter, they are all his subordinates. They were the part of his team and he was the team leader. So this was his failure. If despite all the arrangements, Ivan had escaped. But being the leader, of course, he would pour out all his anguish and anger onto his subordinates. So he said, I don't need to tell you what has happened, do I? His voice sounded almost calm in its scathing contempt. He was quite harsh and wrathful to the two prison officers. He was pouring out all his anger onto them. In its scathing contempt, in complete insulting tone, he was talking to, in a very disrespectful manner, he had been talking to the two prison officers. And which one of you two morons was it who took Evans for a nice little walk to the main gates and waved him bye-bye? He said, who? Jackson, you? Or Stephens, you? Accompanied McClary or Evans for a little walk to the main gates. He said the one who took Evans for a nice little walk. In fact, they did not take Evans. Stephens took McClary to the gates. Now do you understand why he said who took Evans? Because Stephens never took Evans to the little gate. Could you understand what is it happening? Yes, Manish, can you hear?
Yes, ma'am.
So could you understand why he says, which one of you two morons was it who took Evans for a nice little walk to the main gates and waved him bye-bye? Do you think that either of them had accompanied Evans till the main gates?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you sure?
Yes, ma'am. McClary.
Evans wasn't in the cell. Governor had ordered Stephens that after the exam is over, he should make it sure that Ivan was locked in. The door is locked after the exit of McClary. But when governor gives this particular statement, who took Evans for a nice little walk, what does it mean? It means that McClary had not walked out, Evans had walked out. Because McClary, they found, because he wants to tell that the man whom you bade goodbye was not McClary, but Evans, because McClary was found injured there. Right? Okay. It was me, sir. Is that clear to you? Is there the clarity now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. It was me, sir, stammered Stephens, just like you told me, sir. I could have sworn. Yes, Stephens carried out the orders of governor. Governor told him to accompany him, and he did that. What? Just like I told you, you say? What the hell? When you rang, sir, and told me too. When was that? The governor's voice was whiplash now. Why? Because he is very upset. He is very upset, so he is unable to understand that what Stephens has done, he has done his duty. He had been ordered by governor himself to do the same. You know, sir, about 20 past 11, just before, you blithering idiot man. blithering, utterly, completely idiot man. It wasn't me who rang you. Don't you realize? So what was it? What was the use? He had used the telephone at that time, but only to try to get through to the examinations board. He said he didn't call. Because at that time, when at 11:20, the phone crackled, that time the governor was busy in calling the examination board. But he got no response, but he wasn't able to call. He wasn't able to get connected. So now, one by one, all these things, all these facts, they are revealed and then concluded, oh my God, it was really an elaborate and a serious plan by him, right? Okay. He shook his head in growing despair and turned on the senior prison officer. As for you, Jackson, how long have you been pretending you got a brain, eh? After pouring out his anger onto Stephens, now it was Jackson's turn. Yes, when the boss is angry, then subordinates, they have to bear it. And then, well, I'll tell you something, Jackson, your skull is empty, meaning both the officers, they are useless, absolutely empty. It was Jackson who had spent 2 hours in Ivan's cell the previous evening, and it was Jackson who had confidently reported that there was nothing hidden away there, nothing at all. Yes, Jackson had been taking care of everything. He had checked each and everything. Last minute also, he had collected the scissors. He didn't allow him to keep even the nail filers. He didn't allow McClary also to keep that paper knife. And despite that, Evans could conceal, could hide so many things. Yet Evans had somehow managed to conceal. Very successfully, he could hide not only a false beard, but a pair of spectacles too, a dog collar, and the rest of his clerical paraphernalia. Paraphernalia meaning the remaining items. So now do you understand that Bob had? He didn't allow Jackson to check it because he had concealed something in the scalp. That beard he was wearing, that was fake, that was false. The pair of spectacles, the collar, but also some sort of weapon with which he had given McClary such a terrible blow across the head. And then he had been carrying, he had concealed a weapon also, the weapon he had used to hurt McClary, so-called McClary. We don't know whether he was McClary or whom, right?
No,
Okay. The rest we shall continue next week. Okay. And then next week we will conclude it. If any problem, you can always post it on the forum, right?
Okay, ma'am.